That's the way we start this Thursday morning special edition of The Burning Platform, one of our post-election editions of this show, and there will be many of these because we still have to figure out what kind of a government we're going to end up with. This morning, we'll be joined by none other than Advocate Glynnis Breytenbach, who, of course, is the DA's Shadow Minister of Justice. She's also an MP, and I think she's very much on the list in our new parliament. So she probably has a little bit of info. I don't know how much she's allowed to share with us this morning about what's going on behind the scenes, because the ANC and the DA have kept their cards very close to their chests. So for everyone who's come here for some politics this morning, you're in for a good one. We'll also be joined by Kanthan Pillay in a short while. He always has plenty of useful insights and good questions to ask too. So between you and me and Glynnis and Kanthan, I think we should have a pretty busy morning. Phumi's not with us this morning because she's not feeling well. Like a lot of people in South Africa, she's a little under the weather this morning. So I hope Phumi gets better much quicker than the rest of us, because we need her on the show. People get very upset when she's not here. So I don't know if you saw the news, but yesterday the IFP, Hlabisa, who's the leader of the IFP, was on TV, and he held a little press conference, and he said that the IFP have been talking to the ANC primarily about the formation of a government of national unity. We've also been speaking to the DA and to other parties as well. Now, I've only been able to glean a little bit from two places. One is the IFP, because they gave away a little bit about what's going on there. The most interesting thing about that is that they're also trying to, by the looks of things, edge MK out of controlling KZN, which would be quite something because they're the majority party in KZN, even though they're at 40-something%, 44, I think it was. They're trying to get into a coalition in KwaZulu-Natal with the DA, the NFP, and the ANC. So basically anything to keep MK out of power is what it looks like is going on in KZN, which would be interesting because for a lot of people, this is counterintuitive. You know, I saw JJ Tabane last night. He was talking to Gayton McKenzie, and JJ went on an absolute rant about how like the black parties can't stick together. And to him, it's all about black and white. I mean, we may as well be back in 1994. And I can understand that point of view. It doesn't make sense to me, but I can see it from his point of view. And that's the second source of information that I have for you this morning is Gayton McKenzie, who was very straightforward. He has been from the very beginning, whether you like Gayton or not. He said he'll do anything for power when we last interviewed him. He is seemingly in discussions with the ANC, the DA, the IFP, and the PAs throwing their lot in with that group in the government of national unity. It may mean there's a nice cabinet position at very best for Gayton. It may mean that his party is part of what is going to try and get South Africa back on track. We will see. But those are the two big updates in the news as of yesterday. So let's bring on Kanthan and see what he has to say. Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm fit and fabulous. You know, unlike certain other members of our lineup, I tend to shrug off the weather pretty much.
Yeah, Phumi, shame. She's having a rough time at the moment. She did tell me she can't even say a sentence or two without coughing. So she thought it would be too irritating for her to be on the show with us this morning, for the audience to have to put up with that noise. And Glynnis will be joining us shortly. She said to me she's struggling to connect. So if you could just help her out, that would be great. But we'll be joined by Glynnis Breytenbach, Shadow Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, and of course also an MP in the new Parliament. So there's plenty. She can't discuss. She told me in no uncertain terms she can't discuss what's been talked about behind closed doors about the government of national unity. Obviously, it's up to the party leader to announce all of that. But have you watched all these updates? I don't know if you heard what I was saying about the two things I saw yesterday: the IFP leader and his press conference, and then Gayton McKenzie on JJ Tabane last night. Did you see any other stuff that's pertinent?
No, but I've been tracking the stuff around the Zuma court application, and there's been a lot of derision on the usual social media channels from the usual suspects around the papers that have been filed. And, I myself tweeted a meme about a sick note that Jacob Zuma has submitted to the Constitutional Court. But putting that aside, I think the interesting thing is that the supporting documents for the Zuma application have a fairly substantial list of irregularities, and I use irregularities in the sense of procedural irregularities, and I'm not implying that there's any level of malfeasance at work, but there were a range of procedural irregularities that happened with regard to the counting, and particularly with regard to the automatic tallying that was taking place on the IEC systems, which, when the systems went down and came back, a lot of those tallies had been zeroed out.
Yeah.
And
there was huge consternation. People were saying, "Oh, you can see it's all rigged. This is where they're going to insert votes."
And I think that, to some extent, one can take the view that, had the votes been substantially in favor of MK, then it would have been rigged. Had it been substantially in favor of the ANC, then it would have been rigged. Because I think that a lot of this is perception. Now, from my part, I don't really know whether or not this was something that was rigged or tampered with at any level, but that's all the more reason to actually have an audit of the process.
Look, I'm all in favor of that, and we want transparency, right, Kanthan? But
absolutely.
At the same time, I don't see, and I understand that there's this ongoing confusion around whether or not Zuma has any chance at all of succeeding in any of these court applications. The one that they did win was against Jabulani, who's been pretending to be the leader and the founder of this party. Clearly, that was thrown out. But I don't understand how any of this is helpful to MK in the long run, because questioning the election, bringing the IEC in. Sure, there were a couple of things that they didn't do perfectly, but that's pretty much par for the course in any election. Is this going to help them? And if they do a complete audit of this again, is it going to help MK get 1 or 2 more %? I don't think so. Do you reckon it'll make a big difference?
I frankly don't think that it's going to make a difference in terms of the actual results. But at the same time, I think it's necessary that we go through the process. And the reason why it's necessary to go through the process is because right now KZN is this kind of hotbed of really roiling emotions. Do we want a scenario where he's going to have an excuse that says we was robbed? Frankly, I think that if we're delaying the process of appointing a president by a couple of days, just in order for us to be able to wave a middle finger in the faces of everyone who said that the election was rigged, I think that's actually worth the effort.
It's not people, though. It's like a tiny coterie of Duduzile and the people who follow her on Twitter.
Yes, but I think we should also take the view that it's a tiny coterie of people that represent 40% of the people of KZN. And that, for me, is the issue. It's not the fact that particularly think that Duduzile should be taken seriously at any level, particularly since we've seen her pronouncements on how the economy should be run.
Yeah, a shame. It's but then as somebody said to her in a response to that on X, somebody said, "Your family doesn't have a great history with maths. Numbers are not that thing." I want to ask you, though, because you are from KZN originally, and you have a great love for that province, and you've spoken quite loud and proud about it before and what you think should happen there. It's a disaster at the moment. And I heard from Velinkosi Hlabisa yesterday that he is he's looking at forming a government against MK in that province. In other words, that he's looking to put together whatever kind of a coalition, or not him, but all the other parties are looking to keep them out in KZN. That's not going to go well in the long run, because if you keep out people who get 40% of the vote in KZN, you're kind of ignoring half those people, and that's really going to be a dagger in the heart of anyone who's supported Zuma, because it's going to feel like the system is against them. How do you manage that if you're those smaller parties, and would you advise against that if you were in that coalition?
See, the problem, if you drill down to the numbers in KZN, and if you take a look at what would be required to put together that coalition. It relies on votes from the NFP. Now, the NFP was knocked out of the national parliament, as I recall, but has made it through to the KZN provincial legislature. And so in order for us to reach 50% plus one, then you need to end up with the NFP effectively being the kingmaker in that scenario. Now, that's not a good situation at all. Firstly, because, the IFP and the NFP have a very fractured relationship. And secondly, it means that there's an ability for the NFP to effectively dictate terms. And we know that they're a loose cannon. Frankly, from my side, I think that what should be happening is that they should just cut KZN loose, let Zuma run it in conjunction with the IFP, and focus on actually fixing the National Assembly and Gauteng. And we can, rebuild this piece by piece. But I think
I take back what I said about you caring about KZN.
No, I do. But sometimes, one also has to take the view that actually trying to undermine the fact that there's such a substantial body of support for Zuma. And look, further to my point, I've made if you've been keeping track of what Jacob Zuma's been up to recently, he's been talking to every single one of the ANC councillors in KZN, municipal councillors. And I'm talking about those who are directly elected, not the proportional ones. And he's basically been telling them, it's time for you to step down. This will force a by-election. And when you force a by-election, we will put you down as the MK candidate. And that's effectively going to give him a situation where he ends up controlling a lot of the municipalities.
Yeah.
So this is going to be an ongoing thing over the next months. And do we really want the country to be held hostage by a desire to keep this man out at all costs?
We will see. They're obviously going to have to make announcements in the next day or two because Parliament convenes tomorrow. Speaking of Parliament, let's get Member of Parliament and recently re-elected Member of Parliament, Glynnis Breytenbach, on the line. She is, of course, also the Shadow Minister of Justice. Morning, Glynnis. I appreciate you waking up so super early on this cold morning to be with us. And
Morning, Gareth.
It's not as if you've got bugger all to do, so it's nice of you to spend some time with us this morning. How's it going?
Yeah, it's a busy time, busy and a fractious time, quite. Yeah.
Oh, damn right. So, I mean, there's some things you can't talk about. So maybe we should just get to those first. What are you not allowed to tell us? You can't tell us about any of the negotiations happening about the government of national unity behind the scenes, right? That's not for you to announce.
No, absolutely. It's not within my purview. So negotiations about negotiations and permutations of negotiations countrywide are off the table, I'm afraid. Yes.
Are we at least allowed to ask whether you've also heard people screaming for you to be Minister of Justice if there is such a post available to the DA?
I have heard the screams. I don't believe that the post will be available to the DA, and there's no reason to assume that if it was, that I would get it.
That's a very diplomatic answer.
I don't know about screaming, though, Gareth, because I've been one of the people who've been saying, I think that'll be a great idea, but I very rarely scream.
No, what I mean by scream is that there are a few people that are insistent that we fix the justice system in some way, shape, or form, and people are putting a lot of hope on the idea that Glynnis might be the person to do it.
Well, the last time Glynnis was on the show with us, Gareth, you might remember we went, we spoke at length around a lot of the practical stuff that could be done to fix the justice system, and things like blockchain securing dockets and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm pretty sure, Glynnis, that's not outside of your purview, and you can, give us a hint of the type of stuff that we can expect that will happen under practical stuff that will happen under a government of national unity.
Well, we can discuss what we would all hope would happen.
Sure.
So in the justice cluster, what we could hope would happen is that both the National Prosecuting Authority and the South African Police Services would be better resourced. I understand that the country has problems. We don't have the growing economies, no fault of anyone except the ANC. So there isn't truckloads of money waiting to be dished out, but a properly or better resourced National Prosecuting Authority and a properly or better resourced South African Police Service would go a long way to improving the situation of crime and corruption in South Africa. The practical steps that we could take is, the Department of Justice has spent literally billions on an electronic case management system over the past 2 decades. We have nothing to show for it. Nothing. I think if we can show 10 dockets that have been part of an electronic case management system that are successful is a lot. So over a period of 2 decades and billions of rand spent, that's absolutely nothing. But we do need an effective electronic case management system. This business of paper floating around courts, getting lost, getting sold, getting destroyed, getting whatever, it's causing enormous delays. We need to fix the infrastructure of the courts. Anybody who goes to a court will understand that there's a reason why at the moment the courts are underperforming horribly, and it's got a lot to do with infrastructure. Now, at the moment, in the run-up to the elections, in order to gain the paltry 39% of the vote that the ANC managed to achieve, we had no load shedding. At what cost, we'll still find out. But when load shedding is in full swing, the courts cannot sit when there's no power. It's a security risk. A, they can't record anything. B, there's no way of controlling people who are on trial and in custody in the dark. Most courts don't have outside windows for a very good reason, so that people don't jump out of them and run away. So when the lights go out, it's pitch black. The aircon goes off. There's no fresh air. So all of those things need to be. That's low-hanging fruit, easy wins. Those things can be dealt with, but they're not being dealt with.
Not to mention in Johannesburg and Pretoria, I have lots of friends who are advocates, where most of the court smells of urine, and certainly the building on the outside smells of urine because they're so badly maintained.
The outside of the Johannesburg High Court is an abuse. You cannot walk on that pavement. Some of the private businesses there have their pavements washed down at their own cost by their own initiative every morning. You can't. But besides, stepping through puddles of other people's pee, which is not very pleasant, it's dangerous in that area. And judges, have to work there every single day. So judges go to work early in the morning because they're quite busy people. Contrary to popular belief, they work quite hard. They go in early in the morning. They often have to work long hours late at night, and they have to drive around the Johannesburg city centre at those hours. Judges, I know personally of judges who've been held up at gunpoint more than once in the city centre. I mean, that is totally unacceptable. If that's happening to judges, what on earth is happening to the public? And they're entitled to access those courts every day. They're required to access those courts every day. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that I'm afraid the minister has dropped the ball on, and we need to. Those things need to be attended to. Apart from the fact that citizens of South Africa are entitled to access courts in a situation of modicum of human dignity. The court hours have to be pushed back up to 4.5 hours a day. Courts are currently sitting 1 hour and 10 minutes a day or less. Now, how much work can you get done in an hour and 10 minutes in a day? It's a nice job if you can find it.
Sure. So, Glynnis, let's just zoom out for a second. How did the election go for you in particular in your constituency in Pretoria? And what sort of messages do you feel like you can take from this election? Because there are all kinds of mixed messages that people are interpreting and misinterpreting all over social media. And I know that that's not a great place to get a barometer on how South Africa is feeling. But what do you take from the ANC getting, just 40% of the vote, the DA
59.7.
Well, okay, they're different polls that show different numbers exactly. Fair enough. What does that mean to you? And what do you think of the entry of MK, of the EFF coming into 9%, where they've dropped down? Do all of these things give you any indication of what the people of South Africa actually want?
Certainly, I think the election. First of all, I think the election was a great success. So we held a successful, free and fair election here on the little southern tip of Africa for the 7th time in 30 years. That's an achievement. It doesn't happen in a lot of places, particularly in Africa, that you have elections of this nature on an ongoing basis with a population that is reasonably divided, such as ours. We've still managed as South Africans, and we deserve the credit for it. We've managed as South Africans to have elections that are credible, that are free and fair, and that clearly represent the will of the people. The will of the people who bothered to get out of bed and vote, of course, because there are a vast number of people who didn't bother to get out of bed and vote. Yeah. Which is a particular issue that I have with South Africans. You know, we have a country that is in deep trouble. We all acknowledge that. We're all aware of it, and we're all deeply concerned by it. South Africans need to roll up their sleeves, get involved, and fix this. It's not somebody else's job to fix the country. It's our job, my job, your job, and every other South African's job. It's not something that somebody else can do. It's our job. Right. And if we can't even be bothered to get out and participate in one day in an election, well, that is a matter that concerns me deeply.
Well, but of course, sorry, Glynnis, I was going to say, but we've got obstacles to South Africans actually getting up and trying to fix stuff. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen the press statement that came out from, I think it was AfriForum, with regard to the setting up of a private fire department, I think in the vicinity of Bloemfontein, which was immediately challenged by the locals. So at the point at which we tried to step up and actually volunteer to do stuff, volunteering as a police reservist, for example, there are particular categories of people who are just immediately eliminated on the basis of the occupations that they have. So, many years ago, I tried to volunteer to be a police reservist, and I was told, no, actually, anyone who works in the media is not allowed to do so. How do we actually bypass all of those things that prevent people saying, all right, I'm willing to do this. If I fix a pothole in my road, people get upset because of the fact that it's not my job to fix the pothole. But guys, you're driving on the same potholes.
I hear you. And of course, those are obstacles that should be revisited. Many of them are perhaps unnecessary, but not all of them are unnecessary. And there are many ways to help fix South Africa, many ways. If the one way is not available to you, find a different way. Then believe me, that you will find a category of ways that you can fit into. There's no shortage of ways that South Africa needs to be fixed. So keep looking, you'll find something. I too can't volunteer to be a police reservist. I would certainly love to be one. I would love to be a reservist traffic cop and stop all this absolute mayhem on the roads, but I'm not entitled to, and I probably don't have the time. But nevertheless, you keep looking. I'll look for you. I'll find something you can volunteer for. But the elections, I think, were successful, and I think South Africa has made its view known. Those South Africans who voted have made it clear that they were thoroughly disenchanted with the ANC government and have punished them severely at the polls, as we expected. It was time. It was beyond time, and they were punished for the fact that they're inept at government and inherently and institutionally corrupt. Other parties like MK certainly, made a very good showing, particularly in KZN, but that was to be expected because anybody who counts Jacob Zuma out is making a big mistake. He has many qualities that are more than odious. But the fact that in KZN he's exceptionally popular can never be overlooked and shouldn't be overlooked and should never be underestimated. The EFF were punished for their populist behavior and their poor performance and their shocking behavior. People are disenchanted with that. South Africans are struggling to survive. struggling to put food on the table. They don't have time for politicians who throw hissy fits in Parliament and behave poorly. So they got punished, and deservedly so. The other smaller parties, well, they some of them are brand new and they got a little bit of support. And those who have been around and didn't perform, they got punished. And that's what democracy is all about. It's the will of the people. And the result of this election is the will of the people. And so this is what South Africans have given us to work with. And we must work with it. It's now our job to make it work, however difficult that's going to be.
Yeah,
well,
and
it is from the EFF point of view, Gareth. We've had this court case that says that yes, they can be removed from Parliament if they disrupt. So this is a good start.
Oh yeah, that's probably a good start. But Glynnis, it is like a bit of a mixed message, and I don't know if it's competition or whether it adds, fuel to the fire that so many South Africans are trying to light against crime in this country. But whether he's an ally or an adversary, the only other person who makes as many loud and vocal noises as you do about what we could do to fix our justice system is Gayton McKenzie, in a very different way, obviously. But people are talking about his potential contribution too, and he doesn't seem to be able to function at anything other than 100% volume. What do you make of their showing as the PA?
Well, I have clearly they did okay. I think how many seats did they get? 2 or 3?
9.
9. Oh, 9. Okay. Well, they have a following, clearly, and we've seen how they achieve that following. Certainly not the way that I would go about achieving a following. My difficulty is that I'm, old and cynical, and I don't believe that a leopard changes its spots. So I have a difficulty with Mr. McKenzie. I hear the noise that he makes about crime and corruption, and a lot of what he says is so. It's common sense and logic, so that's not rocket science. But I've not seen any time when he's had the opportunity to implement it that he actually does that. So I'm not convinced that he's willing to walk the walk. It's easy to talk the talk. And of course, he has a whole different insight into crime and corruption, himself having been quite intimately involved with that.
Let me ask you something about how, again, a diplomatic answer. And people say you're not diplomatic. How dare they?
I'm learning.
Well, I mean, listen, you get natural politicians and those who have politics thrust upon them. And I think
there's me. Mm.
All right, so Glynnis, let's just look at what might happen here, and not in terms of the GNU, but in terms of what it means for society at large and what it means inside particularly the area of expertise that you occupy, which is, the justice system in South Africa, and kind of figuring out where all the tenders go. Are we going to see, now that the ANC has been reduced to 40% and they have to work with other parties, are we going to see, in an ideal world, and I mean, obviously, that this depends on the personalities involved. It depends on how much influence can be brought to bear in any given situation. But having seen how these things work in court, there are tenderpreneurs and cadres who've been deployed across South Africa over the last 30 years who've done a tremendous amount of damage to the systems. A lot of these people have made themselves extremely wealthy. We used to have the Scorpions. It used to be a thing that particularly investigated people who were doing white-collar crime, people who were involved in corruption and fraud and mismanagement of government funds. Are those people in the firing line, regardless of what kind of a government of national unity is established under the ANC or with the ANC? Are those people right to be nervous at the moment? And is there any chance at all of us seeing some of these people brought to justice under a new regime?
Well, to answer your first question, are they in the firing line? Absolutely. Anybody who has committed corruption, especially grand corruption, they're in the firing line. Every everybody who breaks the law is guilty of antisocial behavior in South Africa is in the firing line. There are no exceptions, and there's no one who can be classified as real game. Nobody should be spared that. Bear in mind that the National Prosecuting Authority is independent.
There are no get out of jail free cards, you say?
Absolutely none. That's just not. But nobody has no party, no person, no political persuasion has the power or the right or the ability to negotiate that. Our constitution is clear. We uphold the rule of law, and everybody is equal before the law. So this is a constitutional democracy, and every day before you go to bed, when you say your prayers, you should say thank you for that. We're a constitutional democracy.
Except the president does have the right to pardon people, doesn't he, Glynnis?
He does have the right to pardon people, but it's not an irrational. It's not a free for all. I like the way you combed your hair this morning kind of approach. It's still got to be based on rationality. There will always be a rationality requirement, so it can always be challenged.
You're using rationality and the ANC in the same conversation. This sounds.
Oh, I'm not at all. I'm using them as opposite. We've seen the president do the most irrational things. Of course, we expect that. But those irrational things can be challenged. So we don't expect them to act rationally, but fortunately, the courts will require rationality.
Isn't it true, though, that in order for the president to pardon someone, they first have to be convicted of a crime?
This is true.
You can't pardon them a priori because they're a mate of his, and
you can't give somebody an indemnity against prosecution. The only person who can give anybody indemnity against prosecution is a court, a properly constituted, competent court after a trial. So the only way to get indemnity is in terms of Section 204 of the Criminal Procedure Act. And then you have to give evidence. You have to incriminate yourself fully. You have to give evidence completely, honestly, and openly, wherein you incriminate yourself totally. And the court at the end of the trial will decide whether you in fact testified openly and honestly. And only the court can give you that indemnity, nobody else. So that's not a possibility.
Well, that particular law has been weaponized against journalists in the past. And so I'm not particularly fond of it.
Section 204?
Yes. You might remember that during the 90s, there was a fairly intense discussion that took place where essentially, at the time, Minister of Justice was Dala Omar, who was trying to insist that journalists should be forced to testify. And this came about as a direct result of the killing of Rashad Staki.
I remember. Yeah, I remember very well. But of course, journalists are not different to other citizens. So we're all subject to the law, and we're all subject to the criminal law. So we're all subject to the point I made at the time. Yes. Yeah. So there's no escaping that. But all of us must put on our big boy brookies, and if you're in that situation, you refuse to give evidence, and you go to jail for the 3 months. So what? It's a principle that's involved, and you don't deviate from it. So,
yes, absolutely. That was my position, but my Senate colleagues disagreed with me.
No. Yes, Africa's no place for sissies. So I forget what we were discussing now. You wanted to know if people are going to be prosecuted. Yes, of course they're going to be prosecuted. The National Prosecuting Authority is independent. Nobody can influence them. So a new government can't tell them what to do. A new Minister of Justice can't tell them what to do. And neither should you be able to. And now you're going to make me not put my dirt bin out. Here comes the truck. Damn. Okay.
Sorry, you see, this is how MPs get into trouble. And the DA is always responsible for all the problems. So now you're going to be blamed.
Everything's our fault. Everything. So
let me get this straight. You're in Pretoria and your trash is being picked up.
No, Cape Town.
I'm in Cape Town at the moment, and my trash is being picked up every Thursday morning, like clockwork. You can set your watch by it. Cape Town works. Why does Cape Town work? Because the DA runs it. So the National Prosecuting Authority, given sufficient encouragement in the form of resources, will, I think, step up better than they have in the past, which has been somewhat disappointing. they have made strides to improve. There's no question about it. Can't be denied. But we're not seeing what we'd like to see. We're not seeing, bums in jail. As you are aware, the Democratic Alliance has a private members bill that we're going to push through this 7th Parliament, we hope, with the support of the other parties, that sets up an anti-corruption commission. It will be a separate institution, separate from the National Prosecuting Authority. It will be an independent institution set up in terms of Chapter 9, which will give it the right to negotiate its own budget. It will be properly resourced, both with human resources and with money. And it will deal with only grand-scale corruption and large-scale organized crime. That'll free the NPA up to get on with the other stuff, of which there is more than enough. Believe me, they're very, very busy. And the Anti-Corruption Commission will have true independence in the sense that it has also security of tenure, because to disband it as a Chapter 9 institution will require a 2/3 majority, a heightened majority in Parliament. And no political party is ever going to see that majority again. So they're going to be bulletproofed against a future administration like the one of Zuma that instituted state capture. So that is what we believe will be a huge contribution to the solution of this problem, and we'll deal with those people precisely that you're talking about, Gareth, the tenderpreneurs and all the pals who made billions of taxpayers' money in South Africa. It's time to get that back.
They're going to be selling a lot of those supercars in the next few months, aren't they? So someone does say that it's very insensitive of you to say 3 months in prison. Let's see you survive 3 months in prison, says one of the comments here, Andrew.
Well, Andrew, if I needed to, I would. I took that chance. I risked it. And here I am. So, I don't think 3 months in prison is a joke. 3 months in prison is a long time. But if it's a matter of principle, then 3 months in prison should not be what puts you off. I certainly wouldn't sell out any confidential information to escape 3 months in prison, I can assure you. But of course, everyone's different.
So, Glynnis, there are obviously all these practical things that can be achieved. I think South Africans probably have an abundance of hope in that all of this will be ticked off, because, as you said earlier, there's no shortage of work to be done. But in terms of just being an MP, how does the day-to-day stuff begin when you guys open Parliament tomorrow, when you start the new administration, so to speak, when you start the new sitting? What kinds of work are you prioritizing as an MP, and what sort of work are you expecting to be handed out by the whip and by everybody else? What's on your list of priorities for this sitting of Parliament?
Well, on Parliament itself, will get into the swing of things probably immediately after the inauguration of the president, and Parliament just keeps on going. The new MPs will learn their roles, and it's a process. But Parliament's job is specifically to conduct oversight over a variety of government institutions and to legislate. So that's what we'll do. My portfolio committee, I don't know whether I will be in the same committee. I hope so, but there are no guarantees. Of course, there's oversight over the justice cluster. As far as legislation is concerned, we have a huge amount of work ahead of us, and we have priorities. As I said, we have the Anti-Corruption Commission private members bill that we're hoping to get through really early in this first term of the 7th Parliament, because we believe it will make a massive impact on how crime and corruption is dealt with. We have the private members bill of setting up an office of the cyber commissioner. That is also a Chapter 9 institution that will deal with cyber crime, cyberspace in South Africa, an overarching institution that will subsume the duties of the information regulator, which, despite serious attempts, has not really managed to make an impact, largely again because of a massive lack of resources. And we see more and more cyber attacks in South Africa, ransomware attacks, particularly on government institutions, and it causes great damage and great hardship. So we want to get that through. And then we have also a finalized, ready for introduction private members bill that will deal with witness protection and whistleblowing, which will revamp the way witness protection is dealt with in South Africa, which is not terrible, but is not really satisfactory, and extend that protection to whistleblowers, as we see a growing dependence on people to be prepared to blow the whistle, yet they have absolutely no protection financially or physically. And so the candle is often not worth the game, and people are afraid. So we need to create a space where it's easier to do that.
Kanthan, it looks like you're having load shedding. Are you all right there? Oh, I think we've lost Kanthan to our first load shedding in his neighborhood. Although he tells me he's off the grid, so I'm not entirely sure whether he's got that right or not. So, Glynnis, what does this mean? What does this mean for the ordinary people in South Africa? I mean, we all went to the polls. Now, people are ridiculous and they have unrealistic expectations. They expect everything to change immediately. But these things are incremental, and especially when you're talking about things like the judiciary, the way that judges are appointed. We talked a little bit about the Judicial Services Commission the other day when we had you on. And prisons. I mean, you mentioned prisons earlier. These things will take a long time, even in the ideal world, in your ideal world, where, you had the ability to wave a magic wand and make things happen. It would still take a long time to do. So what are the big, hairy, audacious goals that you wish to pursue? Because I know nobody goes into this, and you're a very pragmatic person, but there's a little bit of idealism in all of us. Like, what are the things that you would really love to see happen that are probably not going to, but you'll do everything you can to try and bring us across the finish line on some of those things?
Well, let's start with prisons. That's the end of the line for the criminal justice system. So the work that the police do results in prosecutions, and successful prosecutions result in people going to prison if they're guilty. So prisons in South Africa are shocking. There are many prisons in South Africa, and there are a few that are well run and that are acceptable in terms of conditions. So prison is not meant to be a summer camp, absolutely not. But your punishment in going to prison for antisocial behavior is to be incarcerated, to be in prison, to have your freedom taken away from you and your freedom of choice taken away from you. Prison itself should not be your punishment. So the conditions should be humane, they should be safe, and there should be a level of dignity that can't be compromised. Most of our prisons do not meet that requirement. Most of our prisons are human rights violations, and that really does bother me. It keeps me awake at night. Some of them must be bulldozed. They can't be fixed. They need to be bulldozed. We need to rebuild them, and we also need to rethink the way we deal with the results of crime and incarceration. We're stuck in the 18th century of dealing with offenders, and we've got to look at international best practice and find more innovative ways of dealing with different categories of offenders. So to lump everybody together in a cell that's designed for 20 people and you've got 60 or 70, that doesn't cut it, and the result thereof is not somebody who comes out rehabilitated, but somebody who comes out having studied at the best university of crime.
Yeah.
So we need to revamp that, and we have very good programs that we would like to see put in place. For instance, Correctional Services has a massive budget. It really does. It has a very, very big budget. A small percentage of that budget is spent on rehabilitation. Their sole purpose is to incarcerate people safely and securely with dignity and rehabilitate them. Yet the tiniest portion of their budget is spent on rehabilitation. It's not acceptable. So we have to revamp the way this whole thing is dealt with. In order to have successful prosecutions where guilty people are convicted and innocent people are acquitted, you need to have an effective police force. We don't. So our police force needs to be revisited, revamped. The training available for police has deteriorated seriously over the years, and if you want to really depress yourself, just go to a police training college and see what those poor individuals who do sign up for that are subjected to for their period of training. There should be ongoing training in the police. We need to bring back a modicum of discipline in the police, and we need to bring back specialization, which was so it was disbanded with such fanfare when President Zuma came into power. Specialization is essential in the police, and we need to bring that back. They've started to bring it back, but very, very slowly. And then let's deal with justice and the NPA. The National Prosecuting Authority needs, in order to be successful, needs prosecutors. So they have just over 2,000 prosecutors at the moment. I think the majority of which go to work every single day and do their very best under really trying circumstances. But there's a serious lack of expertise. And so you can flood the NPA with new prosecutors. That doesn't help you, because it takes 10 years for somebody to learn to be a good prosecutor. It takes 20 years for somebody to learn to be a good specialist. So time is not on our side, and the National Prosecuting Authority has canned their aspirant prosecutor program because they have no money. So even those new prosecutors that want to come into the system, and I know many, I get asked every day by 10, 20, 30 young people, how do we become a prosecutor? We want to become, we just qualified, we want to be a prosecutor. They can't hire them because they have no money. They can't train them because they have no money. So it's no good the government bleating about being serious about crime when they don't give the institutions responsible for curtailing crime the money to do so. So, you know, I would like to see a real aspirant prosecutors program. I would like to see real mentorship in the NPA by people who have the experience and the knowledge, and there are many of them. People are retiring in droves. Every day it's on the NPA. Those people sit at home and plant daisies. They're very willing and able to go and help. There's no way to make that happen. A way has got to be found to make that happen. All of that expertise is going into planting daisies. It's a joke.
So I've got to, I mean, I'd be in dereliction of duty. There's Kanthan back. If I didn't go to one or two of the questions from our audience here. So Sanele wants to know two questions. Because this came up before the election. It wasn't much of an issue during the election. I certainly didn't see anyone campaigning on it except the Cape Independence people. But do you support Cape Independence? Does the DA support Cape Independence? I'm asking for my next vote stakes, says Sanele.
Does that mean the Cape as a separate entity?
Yes, a separate country.
No, absolutely not. The DA does not support that notion at all. A, I don't think it's sustainable. It's not economically viable, and B, we're responsible for the area of South Africa. We want to see South Africa well governed. We want to see South Africa make a success. We want to see South Africa be a country with a growing economy, not abandon 7/8 of the country so that one small portion can be successful at it. It's not economically viable. It can't happen, and anyone who thinks it is dreaming.
All right, one last thing, and then I'll leave you to Kanthan. So you're also the Shadow Minister of Constitutional Development. So we've heard a lot of mutterings and murmurings from smaller parties that they think it's time to change the Constitution. You know, that we screwed up when we came up with this Constitution, which is widely regarded as a very, very comprehensive and terrific document and well ahead of its time in some ways. Obviously, the practicalities of enforcing some of those things are going to be difficult, where resources are limited, where there isn't a political will to make things happen. But in terms of constitutional development, when you have as many parties as we do now in Parliament, and none of them with a clear majority, it's much more difficult to change that constitution than it ever has been before. Am I right?
Well, no, not. Well, it's more difficult in the one sense and not so difficult in the other sense. So in the sense that one party does not have the power to change the constitution as they see fit. That is so, and it's become impossible, and I hope it's become impossible forever. We have a good constitution. South Africa has a very good constitution. Of course, constitutions are living documents. This constitution was drafted essentially in 1994, promulgated finally in 1996, and things change. Situations change. The country develops. The law is a fluid thing. So constitutions can be amended, and this one has been amended, quite a number of times, more than 10, 11, 12 times, and correctly so. A constitution should keep up with the times. It shouldn't be a document that was, written in stone in the 1800s, and now you're stuck with it forever. A constitution should be able to keep up with the times. It must reflect the norms and values of the society that we live in. So, on the other hand, if there's sufficient consensus over a very broad base now of people, then the constitution can be changed. If you can muster that majority to change the constitution, then it must have the support of so many more people in parliament, which is a good thing.
Right.
So in that sense, it will be much more representative. And in the sense that it can't be changed easily, well, that's excellent, because you don't want one party to have the power to change the constitution as it sees fit.
Kanthan, people said that Sanela said you went to get your legendary sunglasses. You have load shedding. What happened? We lost you for a while there. Glynnis and I were very concerned for your safety.
I have no idea, but the network went down, and when I tried to reconnect, I ended up with glitching, so I restarted my browser, and then all was well. Let's hone in on a couple of things. So, yes, in terms of the way in which our constitution worked, I think at the point at which it was drafted, none of us had the idea that institutionalized racism would again come to fore in the form of affirmative action. And the reason why that came about was because the courts basically said that this was the case. Well, the courts have done some things that I've agreed with. So, outlawing the death penalty, for example, was one way they had me on side. But certainly bringing back racism in the form of affirmative action is something that has been a particular bugbear on my part. Now, it's unconscionable for me that we're going into 30 years now of democracy, and we still have this institutional racism in our statute books. How do we overcome this? So, but I think let's start with that as a point.
Okay, well, the DA has been very clear that that we support affirmative action when correctly applied. So when applied in the fashion that it was intended. But in the form that is currently applied, as you correctly point out, as institutionalized racism, is completely unacceptable, and it's costing the country, and it's costing the people of the country. It's one of the drivers of our huge and high unemployment rate. So that is certainly something that will be on the table for serious discussion in any kind of new government going forward.
Yes, I don't think any of us would object to poverty being a determinant in terms of affirmative action, as an example, which, if one just simply uses that as a marker, then the majority of the beneficiaries will end up being black as the natural consequence of that. But certainly
nobody's got any problem with that. The DA campaigned on merit-based appointments, and then that's the basis of our approach to any kind of appointment process, including affirmative action. And I'm still very comfortable that the majority of beneficiaries of a merit-based appointment system would also be black.
So now, on the subject of Chapter 9 institutions, and I can see particular merit in terms of your wanting to bring in things, for example, like cybercrime units. But we've seen that Chapter 9 institutions can actually be weaponized in favor of particular political beliefs. We saw this very clearly in the case of the outgoing public protector. My concern around having a cybercrimes institution is the extent to which you then have the beginnings of an organization that has the ability to conduct surveillance in terms of private communications of citizens. What type of protections can we hope for in terms of how you guys are trying to craft this new Chapter 9 institution?
Okay, so the surveillance aspect, it belongs firmly in the purview of state security, and we've also campaigned on the issue that we will revamp that department. It has been used and abused atrociously for the last 2 decades, and it needs serious innovation there, and that's something that we're definitely going to be concentrating on. Surveillance of South African citizens needs to be as limited as possible, and is dealt with in comprehensive statutory provisions that are currently on the statute books, and that needs to also be revisited, and I think we're all aware of that. The idea of a cyber commissioner has got not so much to do with surveillance as to introduce protocols that will assist with the prevention of cyber attacks and particularly ransomware attacks, to assist with the development of protocols both in public and private sectors that will increase the ability to withstand those, and where things go wrong, to have a quick, ready, and efficient and effective means of dealing with the fallout of that. We saw a couple of years ago the Department of Justice was the victim of a ransomware attack, and it took months to get that system back up and running. It caused untold harm, called untold delays that have not yet been caught up, and we still don't know, even today, what precisely was compromised and what became of the compromised information. We don't know. And that's a department like the Department of Justice. It's an essential component in the state. So we have to be able to do better than that. And that is envisaged as the job of the Cyber Commissioner, to both be able to protect, so be proactive, and when things go wrong, to be able to deal with the fallout more effectively and efficiently than we're currently doing.
All right. Well,
did cryptocurrencies enter your discussion at any point?
Certainly, cryptocurrencies form part of the provisions of the Private Members Bill. I don't know if you've seen it, and if you haven't, I'll send it to you. So it's been out for public comment. It was very, very favorably received. I'm very grateful for the good comment that we received, and certainly we got a lot of comment that we then incorporated in the draft bill to improve it. So there was a lot of public input, and it certainly covers the area of cryptocurrency, which is an ever-evolving thing and will be very challenging to deal with.
Did you draft this bill, perchance?
Well, I was one of the drafters of the bill.
Yeah,
It was drafted in part, in the biggest part, by my colleague George Michalakis, who was in the National Council of Provinces and who's now coming to the National Assembly from this term. And we were assisted in large by the parliamentary drafting unit, which is a unit that's seldom heard of, but a very competent, very skilled unit that's very effective.
Glynnis, thank you very much for making time for us this morning. I hope you aren't in big trouble with the municipality over your rubbish bins. And thank you for waking up with your dogs extra early today to be with us. Let us know how things go. We'll catch up with you again soon. I hope we get to tick off some of those things on your wish list in this sitting of Parliament. It'll be a hell of a thing if we can get some stuff done instead of being stuck as we have been for some time.
We're going to get them done. Thank you both. Have a good day.
Very good.
Ciao. Bye.
Thank you very much. Glynnis is the Shadow Minister of Justice in the DA. She also is an MP in the new Parliament, which kicks off tomorrow. Kanthan, are you excited that there are some people who we won't be seeing anymore? I mean, Becky Taylor's resigned, Naledi Pandor's out, Lindiwe Zulu's going. There are a couple of names we won't be seeing and saying anymore.
I think I'm far more interested in looking forward. Think of it as a bad dream. We've put it behind us. I'm excited about some of the stuff that Glynnis is saying. I'm still very concerned about having, yet another Chapter 9 institution that can be weaponized against the people on the assumption that the wrong person gets in. And then, getting that person out becomes a problem, as we saw in the case of the last public protector. The Human Rights Commission has been weaponized against me personally, as you know, and there's an ongoing legal process that's happening out there. And, frankly, I think a lot of these need to be shut down, and the work that they end up doing needs to be allocated properly to the government departments with proper oversight by Parliament. But it is what it is. We're stuck with it for now. Let's see how it goes. But I'll wait on the court case. No, we did not go to the same hairdresser. Mine is a Pakistani barber out in Fordsburg. But thank you for asking.
Don't go, Chris. Did Kanthan and Glynnis go to the same hairdresser? I love that. Great. All right, Kanthan, thank you very much. We'll obviously wait with bated breath to see what happens in Parliament, because they have to show at least some of their cards for the first time tomorrow, maybe even today. Who knows? We'll have to keep an eye. I'm definitely interested, because there's nothing worse than the speculation that's been happening over the last week. And my God, has social media just been full of absolute nonsense.
Well, that's not going to change, no matter which.
No, I know. But I mean, what surprised me, and look, it doesn't affect me because I don't let it. But what surprised me is the real reversion in some cases to tribal thinking in some people, because even people I respect talking about, like the DA are going to bring back apartheid, and the PA is a colored people only party, and MK is only for Zulus. And it's such insular thinking. It drove me a little bit crazy for about 2.5 minutes, and then I got over it. But it is disappointing to see people doing this. And obviously the noisemakers and the people who are often paid to make a noise are the ones who have been left outside. And in that case, it's obviously EFF feeling very left out at this stage, MK feeling quite left out in terms of national government, and probably excluding themselves if Zuma's to be believed. But you can't help noticing this stuff, right?
No, but I think that the crucial thing is, once we actually have a president elected and once we actually have a cabinet in place, a lot of that noise is going to die down, and we can hopefully then get on with the business of actually fixing this country.
Well, let's see. I don't know if practical, actual work appeals to very many people who go to Parliament. I'm not sure it does. They like to talk a lot. Let's hope that talk results in some action somewhere down the line. Even if it's just in the Directors General, I'll be thrilled. Everybody's looking for like ministers and all that kind of thing to change, but I would just be thrilled if Directors General knew what they were doing. That would be nice. All right, that's where we wrap it up. Thank you, Kanthan. Nice to see you. We'll catch up again in a couple of days' time. Kanthan Pillay and Glynnis Breytenbach, our guest this morning. Phumi, of course, not feeling great, so she'll be rejoining us next week for another episode of this show on the Podcast Party. Don't miss it. And we will catch up with you during the course of the week on social media and everywhere else. If you don't already, then like and subscribe and all of that stuff so you can get the latest updates as and when they happen. And there's a lot of updating that will be happening over the next couple of hours, so stick around. Cheers. See you later. Bye.